Hi there, it's Sharon and welcome to my studio. Today I have 3 fun cards to share with you featuring the new Sizzix Bowtied Colorize die. I'm going to walk you through 3 cards that I made. I'll be sharing this special delivery card with a craft paper background, and I'll walk you through how I made this craft background. Also, just be briefly explaining the supplies for this Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas card, which I've made with a background using Sizzix dies. And then lastly, we will be making this card together. So this is just a fun card for any type of celebration, but I will show you my process for using colorized dies and how I get all my pieces ready before I assemble. And we'll go ahead and create this card from start to finish. So I hope you'll continue watching and make some cards with me. So for this first card, I kept it pretty simple. I wanted to make a package that looked like kind of wrinkled up like craft paper, like paper that you would get maybe like an old package in, and make it nice and wrinkly. And I just added the bow in red, and then I added the special delivery, and that comes from the chapter 3, the POSTALE set, which has the envelope, and it looks like this. So I just added that to the outside, and I figured that could be just a great card to include with, you know, a just because package. So I'll show you for this one just how I made the background paper, and then we'll get to the bow making on the last card. So for this paper, all I did was just take a piece of Distressed Craft Heavy Stock, and I spritzed it with a little water, just a couple of spritzes on each side to make the paper bendy. You don't want to bend it too hard at first and break it, but it'll start to bend a little more. And if you want, you can give it a little bit more spritz. But I just want to bend it enough so I can kind of crumple it in my hand like a ball, and uncrumple it. And so that is kind of what I did. And I want to make sure I get folds in all different directions. And just to look like I took some old paper and reused it. So what I'm going to do with this next is just give it a quick dry with my heat tool. I'm also just going to quickly wipe my mat off so I don't get any more water on my paper. So once the paper is dry, I'll just attempt to flatten it out as best I can. And I'm just taking some frayed burlap distress ink. So just inking up on a foam blending tool. And then just lightly going over the raised areas. So you'll see it looks like this, and it'll just pick up a lot of those folds. And the other thing I did for this, just because it's going on a card front, was just go around and ink up all of the edges. So it'll just make this panel really pop from our card. And that's it. So I let it dry. One of the things that I did do, I used a regular size A2 card, but once I put the paper on, since I had wet it and crinkled it a little bit, it was a tiny bit shorter, so I just trimmed it off. So it's just a slightly smaller than a regular A2 size card. And then for the bow, I added all the pieces. So I added the background pieces, I added the bow, and then I added both of the little tails for the bow. And here's a second variation on the bow card. So this one uses one of my favorite Sizzix sets from last year. This is called Christmas Minis, and I've used the little gingerbread man and the little holly berries and created a pattern on my card. And I'll talk a little bit on my next card about pattern making and how I go about making a pattern that looks natural using dies or stamps. So I made my pattern, I added the bow. This time I didn't want all of those tails hanging, but I did want to leave a little bit. So I just cut them and added them behind the bow to make them a little shorter. I cut down a little tag from the Tim Holtz Tags dies, and I had stamped a sentiment from the Bold Tidings mini on that, and it just says, "And have yourself a merry little Christmas." So that's what that looks like. And there's just a closer look. I've used 3 different colors of pink on this one. So instead of the red, like on the first one, I used just a piece of shiny cardstock. Underneath that, a little bit of glitter, and then just a piece of textured cardstock on the top. So that's the second card. So the first thing that I do when I use these Colorize dies, there are 11 dies in this pack, and it tells you that right on the package, is I take all the pieces out and sort them. So for the Colorize dies, this one is a pretty easy one. Everything is going to be red. And use your imagination. The color doesn't have to be red, but it's basically telling you that there are 3 different shades of red, and that's what's going to give it the depth and dimension when you layer the die together. So the first thing that I usually do is just take out all of my pieces, and you'll see on the pieces, I'm not sure if you can see that closely, but it will tell you that the piece is bow red 1. So I'm going to just sort all of my pieces into piles first. So I will put the items for red 1 together. Here are the items for bow 2, and this is the straight part of the bow. And when you get to that, you're going to want to cut 2 pieces. And then this is for bow 3, and this is the straight part of the bow that overlaps onto bow 2, and just the little ribbon pieces for 3. So now I have 1, 2, and 3. And what I've done with those is just gone ahead and cut them. And this is for the polka dot card that I showed earlier. So I cut my bow out of silver. So here are the pieces for 1, as you can see. I cut 2, like I said, 2 of the ribbon pieces for 2. Also the bow. And then just the little side pieces. And then I cut my pieces for piece number 3 out of some glittery cardstock. So we can go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and get these dies out of the way and just put them away so I don't lose anything while I'm working with them. And we'll go ahead and assemble this bow together. Before I get started with the glue, I'm just going to make sure that I've punched all these little pieces out of the center of the bow. So everything punched out on that one. I'll just go ahead and use my die pick to get this glitter paper out of the center. So now that we have all the pieces, how I generally adhere mine is I use distressed collage medium, and I just use this bottle that has a pretty small detailed tip on the top, and I take the biggest pieces. So I'll take 1 first, and then I'll take 2 and add that on top. And there are some lines you can see on there. There are some lines where it'll show you exactly where to match your dies up. And then I'll go ahead and add layer 3 on top of the bow. So just doing the same thing. I'll move these up so you can see. Just doing the same thing with the collage medium. And just lining it up so you'll see there's a little line right there, and I'll just make sure that my pieces are even and lined up. I'll go ahead and let that dry, and then we can move on to the bow pieces. So for the bow, we just have pieces 2 and 3, and I have 2 of each of those, so we'll go ahead and adhere those and let that dry, and then we'll just take the ribbon pieces. So we have 1, we'll adhere 2 to number 1. Okay, and we'll just let everything dry. While the bow is drying, I'll go ahead and put the card base together. So for this card, I thought it'd be fun to make like a fun birthday or celebratory card. And I cut out from the Stack Tile Circles dies several circles of glittery cardstock. And what we'll do with these is just like the other card with the gingerbread men on it, we'll go ahead and build a pattern. And I'll give you a few tips that I like to do when I'm using shapes to build a pattern or make my own background, even with stamps. These all have foam squares on them. I wanted everything to stick up a little bit. And when I start building the pattern, I never start right in the middle and like put everything around, because then the pattern tends to become very circular. So what I like to do is just start the pattern kind of off center. So I'm gonna just start it here up on the top, say the top right, and I'll continue building the pattern from there. So I'll put something maybe down here. I'll also add like a purple shape, and I'm not making a perfectly symmetrical pattern or anything like that. I'll add a blue here, and then maybe a green. So I've used one of every single one of my colors, and then I'll just go ahead and fill in the bottom. So try not to repeat the same colors right next to each other.
I need to get some more red on the top, so I'm going to go ahead and just lift this one ever so slightly and move it over and add the red there. And then I will also, I think I'm going to move this yellow one over it a little bit, and just be careful when you're doing this, not to press, I did not press my foam squares all the way down. Just in case this one got a little sticky, just in case I wanted to move it around, but I think that's good. So yes, I know that some of these are hanging off of the card.
So now that the background is done, we're ready to go ahead and adhere the bow. So the first thing I'm going to do is just try to figure out exactly where I want my bow to be. And for this one, I do think I just want it sort of in the middle and just make it like a more traditional present. So we'll do something like that. And you can see that some of the bow will go on top of these raised dots. And then what I did was just try to figure out where I could use some foam tape on the back. So I'll go ahead and take the foam dots off the back where I figured out the raised areas would be, and then just add some Distress Collage Medium on the other parts. So any parts that overlap onto the raised dots will stick. And I'll go ahead and adhere that to my card. And some of it will hang off, and I'll just press it down. And then I did the same thing up here, just adding a couple of dots where I thought there wouldn't be any of the big polka dots underneath. Go ahead and add the Distress Collage Medium to that. And then just make a bow like pretty much in the center. And like I said, there's a dot here and a dot under there. And for this one, I'm not sure I'm going to use these side pieces at all. I kind of like just one big plain shiny bow. So go ahead and add some collage medium to the back and just some to the back of my bow. And then I think I'm going to just put a few acrylic blocks on this just to let it weigh it down and let it dry for a few minutes. So we'll go ahead and let that dry. And then I'm going to just add some foam tape to the back of the panel before I adhere it onto my card. I hope you got some ideas for using the new Tim Holtz Bowtied Colorize die. Please let me know in the comments which one was your favorite. And I hope if you liked this video that you will give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing below. Thanks so much for watching.